Hello and welcome to my newest video. This one's called One Careful Owner. The car in this video is an Austin Cambridge. I'm not sure if it's a 40 or 50 or anything in between. They had so many numbers for a very similar looking shape. It's a Corgi. The tyres are missing, it's pretty play worn. But it does have the advantage of being the one with the windscreen. Bit of the original paint still showing. So I'm just going to quickly drill the case and pull the bottom off. Just showing off my new flashy little voice that I bought with the intentions of not drilling holes in my hands. I've already got enough ventilation in them as it is. Just 3 rivets in the base of this one, and I'm just levering them off. Probably could have drilled them out a little bit more, a slightly bent bottom while doing this, but it's a very thin base, it won't take much to put it straight anyway. There's the original colour on show, which I've had to mix out of a variety of Kratex and JVR paints. We've got them all stripped, and I'm just applying a bit of white because the base coat colour that I used seemed a little dark, and I got the impression that the sort of turquoise colour wasn't going to show very well on it. So, having done a bit of on the fritz maintenance on my airbrush, I'm just dropping a coat of white on it to help lighten the tone a little bit. Just a quick coat all over. Just nice and even so I don't have a mottled kind of effect on it afterwards. Straightforward enough. And it's just a opaque white paint that I'm putting on. It's not a primer or anything. It's already primed enough. And the lady vanishes. And we're back in, having painted most of the body, just flicking a bit of paint on the underneath. I can't see that much through the windscreens, but I do like to do the inside of the bodies as well, regardless of how much detail they have or haven't got. There we go. Just got it on the turntable now. It's got a nice even coat all the way around. And we're almost finished with the paintwork. That's the base. I polished the base up, and I thought it really didn't need any paint on it. It hadn't had paint in the first place, so I simply lacquered it. And here we are doing a bit of detailing. This time round I've used nitro ring mail silver. It's a bit thicker than the silver that I usually use, although it's still an acrylic paint. The aluminium fine that I usually use is a little bit runny, and I didn't want it running into the grille and in places that I didn't want it on this particular car. So I thought I'd give the nitro a try. Always the tricky bit when doing any of these older cars, putting these details in. I don't have the steadiest of hands, and I'm kind of leaning one hand on top of the other. The kind of same sort of style that sign writers use. Quite a bit of detail on this casting. It's a really remarkable bit of sculpting back in the day, long before the days of computer-aided design and just coming to do the last few bits of detail on the grille now. It's turned out pretty well. You may have noticed I've already glued the windscreen in. It was riveted and it was a bugger to get out as well, so I've super glued it back in place. Bit premature really when I hadn't done the detailing, but still, we all make mistakes. Mine was buying this, I think. Catching the last few bits on the grill, so I'm going to put it on and taking it off so I don't have too thick a layer. And that's really it for the painting side of things. So from the beginning I thought that I would lengthen this video out with making a little diorama. So on your right there they've got a piece of MDF board and it's smothered in something called Bake and Bond, and I'm covering it with the Sculpey polymer clay, and it'll help this polymer clay adhere to the MDF when it's baked in the oven. Anyway, it's going to be a fairly simple base. And I'm just using the texture stamp here, just to give it the look of kind of uneven, ropey old tarmac. Because what I'm planning to do is make a base that mimics the kind of bargain basement area on a kind of 1960s car lot. Can't see the texture too well at this point, but it will show up after the clay's been baked and I'll start applying a bit of colour to it. So we've got the texture stamp work all done, and I'm just going to use a bit of tubing that I keep handy to make a mock pattern of a manhole cover, because there's always a manhole cover in the tarmac, usually exactly where you don't want it to be. You either trip over it or skid on it or something else. So that's the plan there. I'm just using a little tool to texture the top of it, try and give the look of that kind of checker plate pattern that you get on the top of the covers. I think that particular thing was sticking in a bunch of flowers originally when I collared it. Always keep these random shapes for sculpting jobs. So now I'll just trim that off a little bit with a palette knife. I tend to use a palette knife when trimming clay rather than something with a sharp edge, as it's most unhelpful to take the end off your fingers when you're doing these things. Tidying up the bits and dabs, checking the coast clear, and 35 minutes later at 150 degrees it's all baked off and gone hard and cooling nicely, and I can carry on and start applying a bit of colour. This is a kind of a metallic black that I'm using as a starter for it. That's a short bristled brush. I've got to use it and scrub it into all of the little nooks and crannies and what have you in the uneven surface. It's just a cheap paintbrush that I've actually shortened the bristles on quite a bit, just for this very kind of thing. It pushes the paint into all the little divots and what have you, and on textured things it's kind of helpful. So that's all done. I've applied a little bit of silver to the manhole cover, and later on I'll put a thin coat of a rust paint on it. Just making sure it's all gone into all the little recesses. I think by this point I've put my maker's mark on the top of the manhole cover. I'm just painting these fake flagstones at the edge of the area now. Kind of recall areas having stone let into the tarmac in these old school car lots from days gone by. Just going in with a bit of model here, funnily enough. It's a Vallejo paint. I think it's called Rust number 2 or some such thing. It looks the part anyway. Again, just pushing it into all the little nooks and crannies till it gives a semblance of something that's been down there and walked all over for a number of years. Just back in with a bit of a black wash now. And pick out the edges of the manhole cover and darken down the tarmac slightly. It's a little bit shiny for what I want. I want it to look a bit well worn and scruffy, and I had oil leak on it and God only knows what during its time. There's the corner of the car lot. Again with that short bristle brush, just pushing the paint around. Made some little divots because I'm going to let some bits of grass into there later on. And this is just a very thin watery wash, just to blend everything together. I suppose you can be as fussy as you want with all of these things, but I thought it was worth the extra 5 minutes just to get the surface as even as I'd like it, even though I'm going to plonk a car on top of it and you won't see most of it. I'm satisfied with that. I'm just picking out the edges of the flagstones with a bit of thin black. Looks a little bit like the business end of Jaws from where I'm standing. Nothing more exciting than painting a multiple repeat of something like this. It's making them stand out, it's making them pop. So there we go, completed that little bit. This is a still of the fence. Quite clearly it's been constructed out of the lollipop sticks, the type you can buy from, I think these came from the works. And I've cut them to length, kind of the hit and miss fence panels that you used to see quite often back in the day. These are going to be, this barbecue skewer is going to be cut into a couple of little flag poles, and I'm going to put a little bit of bunting up, just trim into size with the sprue cutters that I use for everything but cutting sprues. Dog runs a mile when he sees me pick them up because he thinks he's having his toenails cut. So I'm just super gluing them into place with my pound shop super glue. I've got into the pound shop super glue recently because I bought a lot of super glue in stock and about 24 bottles of it, and it all went crystalline and stiff and hard in the bottom of the bottles, and I had to chuck the lot away. It went in the bin alongside a lot of salty tears from me, I can tell you. And I hit it with the zip kicker. Just don't have much patience when it comes to waiting for super glue to go off. And there we go. Trying against the base for size, which I didn't obviously use eventually. I opted for the semicircle. It's bigger than I wanted it to be. It might come in handy for something else. I'm just going to glue a couple of beads to the top of my flagpoles. There we go, got one slightly on the wonk, because it's meant to be that rundown corner of our car sales lot. And on we go with a bit of base coat. Look at that, Mr. Miyagi would be well proud of me. Wax on, wax off, Daniel. A bit on the uprights. And this is a bit of bunting I've cut out of bits of diamond bits of paper. Just filling them in with water-based pens. Gonna go red, white and blue because most of the bunting I've ever seen on car lots has been that colour. Particularly back in the era that I'm aiming for this to represent. Bit of wire for me bunting to go on. And I'm using this Mod Podge as a combination glue sealer, and it kind of has a bit of a texture effect as well. Something else I learned from my wife's paper crafting activities. There we go, pair them up. If they don't quite go on perfectly square, you can always snip them afterwards. Red, white and blue. Usually end up with more of this stuck to my fingers than I do the paper. Oh, there we go. Now I'm just putting a bit of Mod Podge on to seal them. Good stuff, goes off really quick. It's akin to a kind of a rubber solution glue, but it goes off quite quickly. I went on to painting the boards now. So I've got a bit of black and a bit of white in the same pot. I'm starting the bottom off with a bit of a scruffy grey. Can you imagine the car's been washed 10,000 times in this corner of the yard, and the fences are all the colours of the rainbow, everything by the colour it's supposed to be. The damp's got it, and the dirt's all over it. I'm bringing a bit of white down to meet it now. I'm no kind of foremost expert in weathering. This is just how I do it. You may know something different, better, quicker, I don't know. But this is the best I can come up with the materials that I've got. I'm reasonably happy with the outcome. It'll take a few coats or a few layers to get exactly where I want to be. By getting the general general line of what I'm wanting now. Applying a bit of patina now, blobbing it on blobbing it on quite thick with the intention of spreading it out later. Just every other board where you kind of think that the moisture might cause a bit of moss. And I've got some flicking some texture on now, spatter pattern. The more random the better for this kind of thing. I always tend to go in with these things quite thick and then knock them back until I've got the finish that I'm happy with. Putting it on and taking it off and putting it on. I'm sure a lot of you modelers are familiar with this kind of thing. Especially those that like to paint a lot of scenery and stuff for Warhammer and model railways and what have you. I'm just bringing the tones of the white up a little while you can still see the kind of faded bits and the dirt showing through and the bits of green, algae and all the other wear. There we go. Not too bad. Quite happy with that. There is our completed base. We hung a sign on the wall inviting you to make easy payments on the car of the week. These are bits of Citadel self-adhesive kind of landscape grass that I think look really well. I've used them on one or two things. And I'm poking them into the holes that I made in the base to give the impression that the grass has grown through the tarmac and push the tarmac out of the way. It all plays into my seedy corner of the showroom idea. There's one more thing I do after this scene. I decided it was short of a bit of advertising. So here's the completed car on the turntable. Austin of England would have been emblazoned on the wings. Pretty nice little car, I think. What an early Corgi, I believe. Bit of detailing on the back there, the indicators and the brake lights in, a number plate, and there she is on the base. HB Autos. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you could click a like, possibly subscribe if that idea appeals to you. I try to put out a video about once a week and on a variety of subject matters. Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much. See you next time.